Thank you for getting back from the break. It's always a tricky one. Everyone gets out there and you get a bit of chat going and you get excited with Henk and people that have been talking this morning. We've got to keep you going. Right, put those there. We had a really interesting conversation over dinner last night with Brandon and Mike Hawthorne from Clean Energy Culture about speeds of change. And Brandon is a great guy that worked for Red Bull and Louis Vuitton in Paris and stuff like that, really understands like changing culture. And he talked about different speeds. Nature is the slowest, you can't change it. Trees grow at the speed they grow at. Then comes governance and policy. Second slowest growing to get change. Then comes infrastructure. After infrastructure comes commerce. And the thing that moves fastest is culture, is popular culture. And so here we've got two great individuals in their own fields. Dr. Michael Dorsey, as you said, as was said, professor of practice at ASU Global Futures Lab, but also the program chair of the Robert Melani Walton Sustainability Solutions Services. Yeah, got it. It's a bit of a mouthful. Also the founder, though, of Round the Corner Capital. So an educator, a motivator, an inspirer, but also an investor. And then we got Dianna as well, Plastic Pollution Coalition, but also a visual artist. So neither of these people fit into those groups of what we think about as categories. Michael's in the, if you like, commerce category of like investment, but does not move at an investment pace. He moves at a whole different speed, which I think best described as Michael's speed. And Dianna the same. So I want to start, it was important to you when we talked before about, you are professor of practice, Michael, not professor of a thing, not an academic. You don't think of yourself an academic in that way. Why is the practice bit important?
You know, really, Eamonn, practice is what we've got to do. We've heard today, yesterday, this week, that we're well beyond tipping points. We're well beyond having to think about these problems. The problems are here with us in a huge, dynamic, nasty, evil way, but so are the solutions. And they're here in a way that we've got to scale them quickly. And then that's what we're doing at ASU, and that's what we're doing with partners around the world. And we can scale them quickly because the solutions, the clean green stuff, renewable energy in particular, which you heard Danny Kennedy talk about, that's the profitable stuff. We're in really the renewable decade. And actually beyond that, this is our renewable century. Renewable energy is the stuff that's going to continue to be profitable. It's already outpacing the build out of fossil foolishness. That's why we're beyond that fossil foolishness. We're fully into a multi-trillion-dollar renewable economy. And that didn't just happen this year. This year we're on course to do more than $2 trillion in just wind and solar alone. The first time we broke that trillion wasn't last year, it was the year before. Most people miss that. That's why we don't have time to think about really wondering about this problem. We got to really build, and that's what practice is about. It's practice, but it's also praxis. It's delivering that theory, putting things in the ground, scaling things rapidly, being out and staying out ahead of the problem.
You talked about the academic side is like the research that can really drive smart investment, right? So it's like one's actually feeding off the other as well, which gives you this kind of unique position.
Yeah. At the Solution Service, we really use not just the wealth of partners and peer scholars at ASU, but really we tap the global network of scholarly knowledge as our de-risking function to really scale the things that we invest in. We've got a fund that we're building alongside of the Sustainability Solution Service. We've got the anchor investor already at the table. And we're going to scale that fund to really tackle, the first fund is really going to focus on the circular economy and how we can really scale things in that space. But we're also looking at energy, we're looking at finance, we're looking at health and well-being as well.
And we talked about, I mean, the title, it's in the title of this, which is about you know, $1 trillion renewable economy. And I thought it's interesting, like, how far past you feel we are as a tipping tipping point. We talk a lot about tipping points. We talked about it at the conference. We've heard that conversation 100 times, right? But you're like, that's old news. Like how far
That's
down
not even
that
last
post-
week's news. That's like the last decade's news, right? You know, really, wind and solar started to become profitable almost a decade ago, right? And it's been accelerating day on day, month on month, Q on Q, year on year. That's why we've seen these past 3 years in over $1 trillion. And this year, the beginning of this year, we thought we might get to 2-ish trillion, maybe 1.8, 1.9. We're going to be well above 2 trillion just in wind and solar. And that's almost double the investments in that fossil foolishness, that stuff of the 20th century and really the 19th century. The 21st century is going to be a renewable century, and it's already happening. And really what we got to do is think about how do we do something different than we did in the 20th century. The 20th century wasn't just a century of fossil foolishness. It was a century where what did we do in that century with that fossil foolishness? We socialized harm. We manufactured environmental racism. We socialized a ton of bad stuff and privatized the good stuff. A small few gang of characters, oily oligarchs, hoarded the good stuff, right? And poisoned society and caused this ecosystem, this global climate collapse that we're tackling. The 21st century and the 22nd century has got to be about getting out ahead of that and reversing that. What do I mean? It's got to be about socializing the good stuff and not privatizing the good stuff and really tackling those problems out there.
Yeah.
We got to do that.
We heard from utilities. I was interested in the last session. Hank talked about the ignorance of utilities, right? When someone said like, what's the delay in energy? It's like ignorance. I feel like you have a slightly different perspective on that, which is it's less about ignorance and more about slow walking progress.
Well, it absolutely is, and I don't want to point fingers at some of the utilities that have maybe.
But you're quite good at it. You talk about fossil fuels as sociopaths.
I
won't go down that route.
We have to name these things, right? We can't pretend that an institution, an entity, really a finite gang of polluters, isn't sociopathic. We can't live that fantasy. But to answer your question, right now in this country alone, we have got more wind and solar in a backlog than the entire generating capacity of the country. That's not a problem of technology. That's not a problem of the limits of wind and solar to deliver power in a sustained way. That's not a problem of them not being profitable. They absolutely are. That's a problem of politics. That's a problem of some utilities slow walking the solution set.
Yeah. And for the audience, you also, aside from all these things you do, you also sit on the advisory board of Plastic Pollution Coalition. Dianna, let's switch to you. And great, because I love to watch these two disagreeing. They're both on the same thing. But I think Dianna said something very poignant when we were talking. She said, I think if I sat in a room and everyone was my friend, I wouldn't feel like we're making progress. Or something like that. If we were all in agreement, we wouldn't make progress. So it's great to see how you two fire off each other.
I did say something like that.
It was something like that, but I'd probably anyway, I'll move on. Talk a bit about Plastic Pollution Coalition and the role that plays in this conversation.
Yeah, so Plastic Pollution Coalition was founded back in 2009. I come at it as a visual artist, so I've been making work for 35 years out of plastic bags that I cut up and sew back together and make into 2- and 3-dimensional artworks and show them in galleries and foundations and museums. Although I have to be honest that since we co-founded the organization back in 2009, I've only been in a few select shows and I haven't made as much work because I really look at what we've been doing, building the coalition. And I should preface that by saying our mission has evolved since our founding, and we're in our 15th year. We are a communications and advocacy organization working towards a more just, equitable, regenerative world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impact. And I want to say that I think that the health component to plastics is the magic key. So whether you want to argue that plastics are inexpensive or better for packaging or any of the things that people like to argue, the truth to all of that is that our dependence on them and use of them for packaging the majority of our food, beverages, beauty products, et cetera, is harming our health. It is polluting all living things on the planet. And our use of single-use plastic and plastics disproportionately impacts communities of color, indigenous communities, black communities, brown communities, who sit on the fence line of these facilities from extraction through manufacturing. No choice when people go to the market. Oh, do you have that in glass? No, I'm sorry, we only have it in plastic 1-liter bottles. And then instantly, it's a waste management issue, and that incineration or waste to energy or waste to fuel are all of the beautiful euphemistic terms people are using for processing these billions of tons and mountains of it, pollutes us again by releasing dioxins and particulate pollution. And throughout the entire chain, we're also contributing to climate change and global warming and the climate crisis. So plastic pollutes us on every level. Back to our mission. Our mission is to help provide tools, guides, data. We have a new global plastic laws database to help people move in the right direction. And that is not just us as individuals, that is working to educate, connect, and advocate from individuals to schools to businesses to policy.
So you, and what was interesting to me is if you look at the composition of the coalition, right, how many, like let's call them corporates or businesses, were a part of that coalition 3 years ago, and how many now? Like it's changing.
It's changed quite a bit. Yeah,
which is encouraging, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, when we co-founded the organization, we were first about 10 other organizations in the coalition. Our first real year, which was 2010, we were about 25 groups, and one was a business. And it was a company called NatraCares, and they cold contacted us. In 2011, we had the Girl Scouts of America and the Teamsters write and ask to join our coalition the same day, which I thought showed like how dynamic, how broad this issue is, that a lot of different groups are looking at it. So, but again, I think the key to all of this is health. Oh, sorry, I didn't answer your question. So now we're about 50% businesses, which is really unusual, and that's a big uptick in the last 5 years. And those are companies that are providing, some of them are here, Flow Water, and Rich is here, Raz. I mean, companies that are providing solutions. So they're providing infrastructure solutions to filter water, to bring water to people, to bring materials and food and supplies to people and not bring them through plastic, being carried in plastic. So, and that includes a whole amazing regenerative group of businesses that are doing incredible things, really creating alternatives to plastics out of seaweed, algae, mushroom mycelium, the list goes on. And then also investing in and focusing on refill and reuse, using stainless steel, glass, wood, plant-based things. I mean, it's, for me, I was saying to you yesterday, it is the wild, wild west, and it has been since we started this 15 years ago, but in a really good way.
Yeah, we talk about this as Fairshare. I quite like being in the Wild West. There were lots of good actors in the Wild West. It's not all bad, right? You can do really cool stuff. You can move fast. You can break. Well, I don't talk about move fast, break things. It sounds like a tech douchebag. But excuse me. We've not got a lot of time left. I can't believe how quickly these things go. Sure, we're being conned out of time and they've given it to someone else. But anyway, I'm joking. Can we talk about cultural narrative? Because I think this is really interesting. We were talking about, if you look at pretty much any research, it's like, what are the 3 things that motivate people to buy things? And I'm talking about general population, not wealthy, white, or anything like that. It's price first, it's availability second, and often the most recorded thing third is around brand purpose. It's a brand I care about, it's a brand that reflects my values. And reality is, it's that third thing is like very debatable, because reality is when people go into supermarkets, they still buy the cheapest product on offer at the end aisle. The manufacturers know that. Yeah, you don't even know that, most of them. But it's what we do as humans and what we say are different. We see some areas of encouragement, and I'd say the UK, I sound like I'm from the UK, but I've been here 16 years. But looking at the election was super interesting. For the first time, because they've pumped so much sewage in the UK into the water system, for the first time, voting on pollution became a mainstream thing. Why? Because people went to the beach and they couldn't swim. Families went to swim in the river or hang out and have picnics. They couldn't, because there was so much sewage in the system. So that was a very visceral feeling, and then people started to vote on that. And I feel like we have a lot of conversation in these events about the governance, policy, innovation, but you brought up something really powerful to me, which is like, we have to change that narrative so that people understand that if you are a young person today, what we are, forever chemicals, it's about virility, fertility, asthma. So talk a bit about that, because this is where I think we have to change the game. And I want you to talk about how you don't ask for money around renewables. You're like, it's just good business, right? But let's have a...
So just quickly, I mean, look, the chemicals that are used to make plastic, there are 16,000, more than 16,000 chemicals used to make plastic, and 4,200 of them have been identified as hazardous to our health. And yet we're all still eating and drinking out of them. So the chemicals...
Because it doesn't land, right?
Pardon?
It doesn't land with people in their daily life.
Well, it's a total disconnect. I mean, the news that's come out just in the last 3 weeks about finding microplastics in human testes and in penises, I think, should be alarming.
Well, that does, I think.
But I mean, we also found it a few years ago in placenta, both on the mother's side and the baby's side. We've been finding microplastics in human hearts, in our arteries, in brain tissue, in our lung tissue. I mean, it's in our bodies. We are ingesting through food, et cetera, approximately a credit card's worth of plastic per week. Additional to that, we are also inhaling an additional credit card's worth of plastic a week, and it has been linked to lower sexual function, sterility, infertility, breast cancer, brain cancer, and prostate cancer, and to obesity and diabetes, which we are having epidemics of in the United States, and we have also marketed that and exported it all over the world.
And finish us out, Michael, by in the business language, which I love.
Look, that nasty problem that Dianna just talked about is something that we can overcome. That's really that problem that I talked about, that last century of socializing all that bad stuff. This century is going to be defined by socializing good stuff and delivering it at scale and at speed. We can do that on the renewable energy side. We can do that against fossil foolishness. This is our renewable century. Embrace it. Strong hearts to the front.
Yeah.
And it's just smart business, right? It's not about renewables. It's just good business.
We make more money.
Investment.
They don't.
Oh, Eamonn, as you pull those signs out, can I just mention too?
Yeah.
Thanks. I don't know if you all saw Ben Von Wong's Turn Off the Tap out in the lobby, but we had made signs with Ben, and we're hoping that people will take photographs with the signs. This one says plastic pollutes. Do you mind holding that, Michael? Thanks. This one says plastic was never designed to be recycled, and it's still not. Eamonn. This one says plastic poisons us and all living things, because it does. And this last one says 99% of plastics are made from oil and fossil fuels. So I hope that you'll all take a minute and take some selfies out in the lobby with Ben's beautiful piece. He's speaking later today.
So there you go. Make the most of that. Please make use of these signs. Please take lots of pictures. Please share them on all the Instagrams and everything that you've seen. Thank you both.
Thank you, Eamonn.
I wish we had 3 times longer. We always do with every session we have. Thank you, Sierra, for the time. And on with that, we're out.
Thank you.